Hello, this is me, Anthony, and this is my mom's podcast.
All right, family, y'all, we are in the space. Y'all need to turn up this podcast because I am on here with my mentor, my father. I am on here with the Joseph Graham. You're Joseph Graham Sr., right?
Junior.
Joseph Graham Jr. That's right.
Yes.
Joseph Graham Jr. Yo, also, I don't know his real name because I've been calling him PG for 20 years. So I have known PG for 20 years. I often say my college pastor, which is crazy because I wasn't actually in college when he was pastoring me. But I tell people all the time so they understand the magnitude of this man's spirituality, but also education. I mean, there's nothing like y'all. I tell y'all, I got some favorite people when it talks about Black people in education is PG, Dr. Umar, Dr. Monique Colson. Those three are like my top 3 spots, and PG is with it. So I tell him all the time, he's like Dr. Umar with the Holy Ghost. So shout out to Dr. Umar, we love you. And PG is from the same spot. So PG, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background in education.
So I'm from New Jersey, and the youngest of 4 sons. My mom and dad, who raised me, grew up with them, family household. And my mother and dad sacrificed and spent the money to put me through a private white Christian school. And on the face of it, in terms of growing up in a God-fearing family, we did that because it was awesome. Mm-hmm. But we were dealing with a space where in the white Christian church, they legitimize all things patriotic and so they make it synonymous that if you love the Lord, then you love everything that white America deems is correct. Mm-hmm. And that caused problems for a young Black brother like myself. And so I always tell people my story of being an advocate when it comes to education of Black students starts with myself in a private school, advocating for myself in an environment that wanted me to be uncomfortable in my own skin. Mm-hmm. Fast forward, I would tell people that my family got caught in Reaganomics, which means that I went to Morgan State University for 1 year, could not go back. Family couldn't afford it. And these elders out of Philly, the UNIA, the authors of The Journey of the Songhai People, Brother Battles and Brother Robinson, God bless their souls, they used to have a class through their organization, the Pan-African Federation Organization. I used to go there every Friday and be educated about my history, African history, African-American history. Consequently, I was from North Jersey, they coming from Philly. We met in the middle, which was Trenton, at a historically independent Black school called African People's Action School, which years later I would become a teacher at, where I was actually trained by Afrocentric teachers on how to teach our own community. It wasn't until many years later I got my degrees because I was trained by our own folks on how to educate our people.
So I love that, and I'm gonna let you continue because that your story does not end there. But it's 2 things that I do want to bring up. Number one, as a previous homeschooler, sometimes you'll hear people say, "Oh, people should only homeschool if they have a certain level of official education. You need to have a master's degree in education, or you need to have a whatever." And I'm really taken back to some of those educational spaces, like the spaces that the Black Panther parties began, what you're talking about in Trenton, New Jersey, where you had people who had a love for the community and brought that expertise and wisdom to start to really teach kids how to love learning. Whether you had a degree or not at that time, it was this is how you love learning, and that sets kids on a path to be able to far exceed us. So I love that. But then even what you first started off with when you talked about going into the private school. And one of my friends, one of these women that I listen to, is really talks about Black homeschooling. Her name is Pamela. And what she always says is she talks about how private schools were created to legally keep out Black people. Because during the time when desegregation was happening, you couldn't desegregate. I mean, you could desegregate, but a private school, they would just keep raising the price, knowing that economically, most Black students could not afford to attend there. So even the ideology of these Christian private schools are steeped in segregation. And sometimes we forget that until you start hearing stories and you're like, nah, this is a wild time. So
no, that's absolutely correct. You're exactly right. And let's even add the other context to it. When zoning did not accomplish the mission of resegregation, that's what helped further the idea of private schools. And just for a quick plug, my master thesis, which I got my master's in sociology at UNC Charlotte. The title of my master's thesis, you can look it up. You can Google it, Atkins Library, Joseph Graham Jr. Race, Resegregation, and the School to Prison Pipeline in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County.
Wow.
So that's always been a game. People don't realize that every step that Black people have made to be humanized in this country has always been met by white America trying to dehumanize us in return. Those are the facts. Wow. And as far as what you said about having enough education to educate our people, our current statistics tell you that letters of a piece of paper and degrees and titles attached to folks' name has not increased the educational acumen of American society.
Period.
So what are we talking about? Uneducated, only went up to 6th grade. Black brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers was teaching reading and mathematics in Sunday schools during segregation because they couldn't get education, couldn't go to nobody else's school, but yet we was able to build Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, the Black Wall Street, and everything. And Central Park was ours too, but that's a story for another time. So this whole thing about what you need pieces of paper for, it's a farce.
It's a farce. I mean, this is Black history right now. At this point,
and since we're talking about Black history, where did we get Black history from? It started from Negro Week with Carter G. Woodson. They didn't even give us a whole month, gave us the shortest month after that. But it was started out with just a week. So I tell people, if you don't read Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro, and you had the nerve to actually go get a degree, then you're exactly what he was warning us about.
Oh, that's so good. Oh my goodness. Challenge us. I love that, PG. Listen, I mean, and this kind of goes, your passion is so clear, you know. I mean, it is what it is. But as we talk about educating Black and brown children, you know, is this what motivated you to become a college professor? Because you went from educating before you had a degree, and then now, you know, you're a college professor and really focused on, as we can all hear, the history of education and what it has done to people who are non-white. So how, you know, what motivated you to continue in? Because you're a college professor now. What motivated you to do so?
Yes, right now I teach at UNC Charlotte, which is exactly where I got my bachelor's and master's degree from. And I teach in sociology, health and medicine studies, religious studies, and women and gender studies. What motivated me was the work that I did as an advocate for equity in education. And so that's what really kicked off me getting this class, and why some colleagues of mine asked me to come on board to do so. Because you got a lot of people breaking down information they don't know no history about. I remember when I was getting my master's degree and we sitting there talking about racism and desegregation and systematic, you know, oppression. And, you know, and there was only me and another brother in there. And we had to say, listen, while y'all sitting up here pontificating and talking about theories, we actually looking at, now we figure out why our uncle was that way, why our cousin is, what happened to our cousin. Like, this information is hitting us personally. So that ain't just looking at research, it's our life on pieces of paper. And so the reason that excited me is because now as a professor, I get to bring a level of experience and context to the information that people are learning about. And so that excites me. And remember now, I taught first grade, second grade, and third grade. I taught middle school. I've taught high school. But in terms of in these college spaces, it helps to bring, right before these folks walk out and be full adults, do you give them, and I love teaching all a diverse audience too, and giving them a understanding of what we're really dealing with.
I love
that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. And, knowing that you, again, we can hear how passionate you are. We can hear you said something where, like, if you start to teach or even get a degree and you haven't looked at the history, why is that so important to you? I have a colleague, I teach middle school social studies and ELA, but social studies is my thing. I'm a certified Georgia middle school teacher. Mm-hmm. And the chair of the social studies department at my school, he has this saying where he tells everybody every day that everything is all things social studies. He's like, I don't care if you're talking about math, I don't care if you talk about art, whatever.
Yes,
like, there's some history behind all of these that can be studied. And so, when I hear you say, hey, it's important, I think about how important is it for those of us in education or interested in going into education to know the history, especially those that are serving in underserved communities with Black and brown children. How important is it for us to understand the history before we get to the classroom?
So let me tell you this. Dr. Cindy Trim,
mm-hmm.
who started Kingdom University, which I am very proud that I graduated from many years ago.
Yeah.
And she said this quote I use everywhere I go now. And that is, if the context is wrong, the conclusion will always be wrong. And the reason why that phrase is relevant to what you're asking, for people to go into education without the proper context of what education in America even came from and what things were taught inside of the educational system that are erroneous and purposely in error to produce a certain brainwashing and mindset.
Mm-hmm.
If people do not know this, you can have the most well-wishing, good-intentioned people to still perpetuate systematic racism by being intellectually ignorant.
Mm.
Because if you don't know that what you think you understand has been skewed to blind you from really causing people to understand where they come from, where we come from. It ain't just a Black thing. And this is the thing. Professor Dr. Kendra Jason, who I love, taught a class called American Minorities. And in this class, what I thought was so revolutionary was that I saw Italians, Polish, Irish, Jewish discover that when they first came here, no, you weren't white.
Yeah.
And no, nor did you have privilege when you first came. Based upon the mission to oppress Black people, they created a system that you had to acclimate into. So even when Europeans came over here, they had to become that. Why is that important? Because if you think that you just always been this awesome white person all your life, and you think America's just been wonderful and Black people just happen to be the poorest, just happen to be not successful, then you miss out on the fact that you don't have the empathy and don't realize that your history ain't like ours, but you got some stuff in your history that can at least give you a context to be humane enough, to look at what's happening to your brothers and sisters who don't look like you and say, I can't allow this to happen, even amongst my folks that I'm kin with too.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. I think, like you said, knowing the history, we go through in fifth grade, we go through like the industrialization era. So learning a lot about like the Newsies and different things, learning that these kids who were of different races when they first came, or considered different races when they first came, how racist it was toward them, toward their ancestors, and what that
Yes.
like. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's definitely man, it's so much when you got history and you start to understand. It should make you more empathetic to the communities that are still dealing with the oppressive nature of the structure of this country, instead of pretending like we made it and we don't care. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
As we're talking about education, I know you spent time, and you still are an educational advocate. So let's talk about. Let me ask you this: how do you define joy in the context of educating Black children? How do you define joy?
How do I define joy in the context of educating Black children? When it becomes normal and not a shock or surprise or special event for Black children to realize that there is no sphere of success, excellence, or academic achievement that we have not produced as a people. Which means that every artist, scientist, mathematician, engineer, athlete, whoever you are as a Black person in all of those things, you're successful at all of those things because your people have contributed and in a lot of ways have been the cornerstone for so much that this world celebrates and so much that has produced wealth and produce knowledge, wisdom, and transformation in the world we live in. Joy is when a child can show up being themselves and can celebrate being themselves, and it not be some sidebar part of the year in a particular month, but it's an everyday dose of self-love and admiration.
Oh yeah,
That's what joy looks like.
I love that. Yo, I love that. I love how you really just described what joy looks like. So how do you integrate joy and cultural representation in our teaching approaches? Like how can you encourage educators to integrate that so that it actually makes a difference from what we've been seeing historically or in these last couple decades with education?
How we bring that in is having educators be consistent at letting the students know that the contributions of people of various different racial and ethnic backgrounds is normal for it to be shared, studied, evaluated, talked about in an educational setting. It needs to become normal. See, the only way that you can counter systematic racism is with systematic, equitable education. In other words, Eurocentric, ultra pro-white education has been so normalized that when it's removed, it feels abnormal. We have to flip the head on that. We got to make it normal that we're going to talk about all of the contributions that so many different races and ethnic groups that put America together. It becomes normal so that it becomes abnormal for us to mention just white historical characters. That's how you bring joy in the room. And here's the thing. Now, for all of those who have been erroneously misled about CRT or the very idea of making sure everybody's represented in history, it doesn't cause white children to feel bad about themselves. It actually makes all of us come to a basic human level playing field to embrace one another. What makes white students feel bad and negative is when their white adults keep trying to push away, push back, and deny racial history and the existence of racism, while they know better inwardly. They know that that's not true. Yeah. So when you normalize the fact that we're going to celebrate all contributions of everyone, then nobody's left there feeling super sorry, super bad, and super pitiful. Everybody walks away with not only the joy of their own specific racial and ethnic contribution, but now I see the connection with everyone else.
Yeah.
That's what brought joy into the classroom with proper cultural representation.
You know, I'm glad that you said that. In my classroom, I have a Black Panther Party flag. I have a Pan-African flag. I have all of these pictures of African-American leaders first. You know, I have all of these pictures of Palestinian leaders. I have all of these pictures of indigenous persons. I have an indigenous First Nations flag. So it's you know, kind of in the space of what America looks like, but it has the actual original tribes and where they were, you know. And that's the first flag that I show to them in the classroom. And you know, my students was like, well, this isn't the flag. I said, no, this isn't the flag today. And I likened it to what we used to see with the Soviet Union and the USSR. And I'm like, you see how it has changed over the years based on the wars that have been fought and different things like that. Well, these people were massacred, but this is their land. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. And so but again, it starts to help the conversation where they realize that, hey, we should be acknowledging the people that this belonged to them first. Just like when we go to these institutions like University of North Carolina, or we go to Duke, or we go to University of Kentucky, and you realize Black people physically built this school and could not attend, were enslaved and built. They weren't paid to build it. They weren't hired.
Okay.
The enslaved people were used to build this and then couldn't get in. So of course people are going to say, hey, you should be given award. You should be giving scholarships to this demographic of people because they built the classroom that you're walking in. And so I think you're absolutely right. We start to have a different conversation. And I hate that it almost feels like we have to make it a us versus them because we have to defend ourselves. Like, it's like, I shouldn't have to defend the work that I've done because you're benefiting from it.
Exactly. And here's the fact is, you're not making it us versus them. They have designed it so that there is an embedded into the psyche of America is to never honor or value Black bodies and brown bodies like we do white bodies. That is the foundation of every political, social, and economic, and dare I say, even religious cornerstone in the fabric of America. So the very idea of you pushing your humanity to the surface, just by the nature of how this country has constructed, it naturally makes you feel like you're in opposition because it is something that they specifically and intentionally have tried to continue to suppress. So if you're going to push against it, you're actually responding to what is to a precedent that's already been set. Yeah. So it's crazy when people be like, y'all stirring up trouble. No, saying that Black people talking about their contributions is stirring up trouble is like telling a person that's drowning who's now trying to get out the water that, yo, you're disturbing the pool part. I'm trying to live. Exactly. Sorry to disturb you sipping on champagne in the 3 feet or in the jacuzzi having a good time, but somebody's just trying to live over here. Can I live?
Can I live? Can I live? Because it is Black History Month, okay?
You know what's so amazing? I teach a class at UNC Charlotte called The Challenges of Doing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Corporations, Religious, and Educational Institutions. And we were talking about, I was bringing up Nikki Haley and her when she was communicating about Civil War and didn't bring up slavery. Yeah. And what is so astonishing, I think it would be amazing if it wasn't so sad to see how folks with intellect jump through hoops to justify when leaders of their particular political persuasion speak erroneously and incorrectly. How can you talk about slavery and not mention, how can you talk about the Civil War and not mention slavery? Imagine us talking about the World War and we act like the Holocaust didn't exist.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Could you imagine discussing Nazi Germany and you never bring up the Holocaust? But you want us to talk about the Civil War and you're upset because folks found fault and you not bringing up slavery.
Yeah.
The fact that that is even a thing, to me, I turn it on its head. I tell my class, let's not get hype or mad. This is actually exhibit A of why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a whole nother podcast in itself. I mean, we gotta come back on DEI. But as we're talking, about education, and you mentioned some of these struggles and these challenges, what do you think, or how do you think systematic issues? We kind of talked about racism in the class and how it affects education, but what do you think about how poverty, how it impacts the classroom and the educational journey, particularly of Black students?
So, one thing, this is why history is important. Because poverty did not become a factor in the educational process of Black and brown children, or Black children to be specific, until integration. See, the reality is, when we were dealing with segregation, which was a horrible reality because it was a fake, separate but equal circumstance, what you at least had was the community believing in their own children and doing whatever was necessary to wrap the education around that child's learning abilities. When integration comes and we end up mixing our children in environments that did not want them, a system that did not want them to succeed. So what happens is we gotta first start with, this is a system that was not designed to properly prepare Black children for life in America. Let's just start there. That's not what it was designed for, number one.
And when you say this system, you're talking about the current traditional system in the way that we are. It's not designed for Black children to win, essentially.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
I agree.
the educational system is not designed. So when people be like, the system is broken, what did I say earlier? If the context is wrong, the conclusion will always be wrong. If you come from the context that this American education system is broken, you have missed all of essentially the history of education in America.
Mm-hmm.
It was never designed. This is a system that it was illegal to teach Black people to read. So let's just start there. So reality is, poverty comes into place because, one, the system isn't designed with the express focus of helping them come out of poverty. The system does not design to wrap around culturally to what is necessary for this particular demographic to learn.
Yeah.
Then we look at the average classroom. Listen, white women make up 70% of educators in the school system. Mm-hmm. The education style in the classroom uses white women, basically persona, as the blueprint, which is more of a sit still, hands together, legs crossed learning. That doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
So that becomes another component. Poverty comes into place where people who are poor in America are looked down upon. Mm-hmm. And when you break that down to what schools get and what schools do not get, schools in impoverished areas do not get the same level of resources. Mm-hmm. They do not even have the same level. And you're not dealing with people in PTA that are at-home moms that's able to donate and provide and give certain resources that are necessary.
Agreed.
So all of those things go into play, and the parents are working or don't even have a lot of the opportunity to go and protest and beef with the schools to make demands, because a lot of them are not even in that sync with knowing what to do. So there's many factors that lead to why poverty becomes a factor. Number one being a lack of care and concern and attention.
I love that. I saw something on social media where they said actually that the Black community holds the greatest academic achievement because in 1865 we saw our community being told that we're free. Our generation, our ancestors being told that they are free. Well, but then at that time it was illegal, and before that it was illegal for them to learn how to read. And so you have this group of people who were free and couldn't read, couldn't add for the most part. And then they did, they were talking about the data and how so quickly that these people, I think you mentioned it earlier, these people who maybe only had a 6th grade understanding and reading level began to teach a whole demographic of people how to read, so that the number jumped up. I think they ended up doing, it was like 56%. And they were like, there is no other community that has ever been not allowed to read who jumped up all over 50% in a 30-year time span. And so it really just brought me back to, as we're kind of, closing up, thinking about what do we hope for the future of the education of Black children. And people will say, it's really for all the kids. And yes. But what we are seeing is a significant gap. And I started questioning, is the significant gap because of what you just mentioned? Are we asking them to be graded based on the bar of a predominantly white woman, a benchmark that is placed by 70% of white women who are the teachers? Is that what we're measuring them by? Or are we measuring them by what they are a genius at and how they show up as that genius? So for example, when I was a homeschool parent, when we did math class, we didn't do it with books. We didn't do it, learning worksheets. I gave Trinity and Judah $100 and we went to the grocery store and I said, we got 5 days to eat and we need 3 meals a day. We got to figure out how to do it. And they started to realize, like, money is not just this foreign concept. Math is not this foreign concept. This is how we eat. This is how we make sure that everybody does. So that's not something that they would be graded at, maybe in a middle school. But in life, like you mentioned, I don't care how good you do, PEMDAS, if you don't know that the money got to help you eat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you hope? Like, what do you hope for education?
My hope for education is that that the education process actually connects to what it needs to be preparing children for, and that is life after school. Mm-hmm. Like we gotta be honest about one. So there's 2 things at play. One, teaching style. You gotta listen. A person goes to a clothing store. There's a big difference between you saying I either need a small, medium, large, or XL, and a tailor coming out and taking your measurements.
Yeah.
We have education system has to come from a tailored perspective. What is this child's strengths? And how do we make sure that we teach them according to their strengths? You can't give a person a size 8 shoe and they are a size 10 and get mad because it don't fit. And then tell the customer they have failed because their foot was too big. No, the store has failed because you didn't take the proper measurements and give what was necessary to fit their needs. That's what the education system needs to do. Which speaks back to what I said about smaller classrooms and more defined skill sets in our teachers. We've got to make The lessons have to be wrapped around what helps this child learn, not just shoving it down the throat.
Yeah.
I got emails to send today regarding one of my children.
Yeah.
Like, and it ain't like we need to kill, and our black parents sometimes we need to wake up. Don't get me wrong, I don't co-sign laziness or inappropriate behavior from my children. But let's be clear, some of these educators are not doing what they need to do. And guess what? I don't want to beat up on all the teachers. I've been a teacher too. Some of these administrators are not empowering the educators to even make an impact. I always say this. This is when I'm doing consultant work with schools, this is the format I build with. I call it a 3-way partnership. And this is for anybody that wants to cause transformation in your school, whether you're a principal, a parent, or a teacher, or a student just saying, I need better. This to me is the beginning of the formula. The 3-way partnership is when you have the administrator, that's the school principal, you have the teacher, the principal's the authority on the school structure, the teacher's the authority on the classroom structure, but the parent is the authority on what this child needs. Those 3 must come together with a partnership with the student in the middle and come up with what is the best way to make sure these said lessons and core subjects of understanding, how can we take the knowledge of all of those 3 entities and make sure that this child is getting a tailored education.
Yeah.
That is key.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love that you didn't put the blame on anyone. I think too often we hear the parents are mad at the teachers are mad at administration, the teacher's mad at the parent, the student mad at the parent. And I've learned this year in traditional schooling, I have learned that our parents are trying the best that they can, and that the cost of living is so high that they are working 2 and 3 jobs and they can't help. And so now the onus is on me as the one who said I love education to put that passion and to flex and make sure that every child gets a good education. So thank you so much, PG, for all of your work, for all that you do. I mean, we got to have you back, of course, as I keep saying. I know that you have some things coming up. You got your book that's out, Light It Up. It's on Amazon, right? Joseph Graham. It is Joseph Graham Jr., Light It Up. Please head to it, get the book. I know you really work in faith and mental health, and you have some things that are coming up. You're taking a group to Ghana. Is that correct?
So I my book is called Light Up, a guide for how to balance faith and mental health. And it's available on Amazon. I basically, it flows like a journal, but it's me coming to the intersection of faith and mental health because of my own dealing with a loss of my mother, a loss of my father, divorce, and all of those dynamics. And the steps that I went through to overcome those things are chronicled. And I now use it for what I call a wellness ambassador program. So I partner with healthcare agencies and groups, and I help people who have a value in their faith, but they also want to be intentional about their social and emotional well-being and overcoming some mental and physical health challenges. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, so Road to Damascus Faith and Mental Health Ministry is the name of the church, and it's very intentional about, listen, we're not going to use religion to hide from our trauma, right? And that is a growing thing. Even though a lot of people are open now to have more conversations in faith-based spaces about mental health, it still needs to grow. So Road to Damascus, our very first mission trip is to be in Ghana, where we are sharing and talking with a number of ministry leaders and churches, and even at the University of Ghana, about us bringing a whole new level of mental health awareness to our people. And anybody that would like to donate for that trip, you can go to it's the Cash App, it's the cash symbol RTD Church, and it'll say Road to Damascus. So cash symbol RTD Church is the Cash App handle Road to Damascus. If you would like to donate for us bringing mental health awareness to some ministry leaders at the University of Ghana in this coming May.
Love that. I love that. RTD's been doing real work forever. Of course, listen, if y'all can tune into, I think it's PGTV Network.
Yes, the PGTV Network YouTube channel. Sunday service every Sunday at 11, but there'll be things going on all week dealing with wellness and social justice and education.
Yeah, and listen, if you are in a relationship and you ain't married, listen, if you in a relationship, I tell everybody every year, when I went to RTD during my early 20s, every February, PG preaches the love series, and I would break up with whoever I was talking to because I'd be looking like, wait a minute, you ain't nothing. So if you got questions, if you done see some little caution flags or red flags, go ahead, go back, listen to the series. I'm telling you, there has never been a year in over a decade that the love series has not challenged and put things into perspective. And even whether you're in a relationship or not, I even started to use some of those things for corporate relationships. So whether I chose to stay at a business or not, or stay in a job or not. So it is way more, but the love series, I'm telling you, it'll wreck you or it'll set you on a place to greater. And so make sure you do that and hang out and make sure that it is amazing. The love series is a long-standing pillar in the kingdom for sure.
Amen. I appreciate that.
PG used to be like, oh, what happened to old boy? I'd be like, nah, he had to go.
It's real in the field, let me tell you.
So thank you again. Of course, thank y'all so much for listening to this, for listening to Sunnyside View. We will be back next week. PG is closing out our Black History Month with a bang, and I'm so excited about it. Until next time, keep it sunny, y'all.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to Sunnyside View.